So Phil, I was thinking about brewing in Legacy and what's possible with brewing. How do you determine, what are the hard stops, right? The walls of the format, as it were, where you can only brew up to a certain point. Perfect example would be like cards like Swords to Plowshares, like Fatal Push, stuff like that. Cards that kind of have to be included into a deck at the bare minimum to be able to be playable in the format, and then cards that sort of push those cards in a direction. Like Fatal Push is playable because we have cards that are basically under a certain mana cost that are playable. Generally under 4 for sure, and under 2 for the most part are playable. So you can play cards like Fatal Push. When you're brewing, you have to look for these little spots that make your deck still work in the format. And I think it'd be interesting to talk about sort of what the walls of the format were and brewing for Legacy. This episode of Eternal Durdles is sponsored by CardMill, the first automated scanner and sorter built specifically for trading card game players. With its intentionally compact design, CardMill uses AI-powered recognition to identify each card and sync inventory with real-time pricing, batching up to 300 cards at a time by name, set, color, or type. Collection data is securely stored in the CardMill network, giving players full access to their cards through an easy-to-use web portal. CardMill supports Magic the Gathering, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh!, Flesh and Blood, Disney Lorcana, Star Wars Unlimited, and many more to come. Created by software engineer and longtime Magic the Gathering player Jonathan Dumanis, CardMill launches on July 22nd on Kickstarter with early bird pricing starting at $350. Backers receive lifetime access to all software updates and new features. Go to cardmill.com to learn more and reserve your path to the future of card sorting.
Yeah. I think that the idea of what walls are, how do you differentiate those from pillars is really like
for sure.
a challenging spot. And I think that the walls are just a more specific lane when figuring out the pillars. Once you know what the pillars are, then you look at the context of those pillars and how those pillars change within the given context that you're trying to brew in. And then from there, you can understand what the boundaries of what you have to brew in are. It's sort of a broad strokes like what we talked about a long time ago where, it was like, I want to play as few lands as possible and I can't have my curve go above 2. And, if you look at what...
So I want to stop you there because I think one of the things that like we bore out in that conversation, and I'll link that somewhere or I'll link it below. So, watch this video, then go watch that one. But is that why, the reason why that 2 mana challenge you put to your deck in brewing exists is because of a pillar, right? So the pillars determine the walls in some ways.
I think the pillars don't in some ways determine the walls. I think they do determine the walls.
Yeah.
If you're looking for the boundaries of what is possible, then you have to think like you can look for answers to certain things or proactive ways to stop whatever. But if those things don't follow within the guidelines of the context that those pillars are now arbitrating, then even though those tools theoretically could be a way to solve something, it's not actually going to be a way to solve something. Like I'm like, oh yeah, like I think that a way to beat a Dread Return through a Teferi is to stack my deck with a 4 on top and a counterbalance on the table. And it's like maybe if we're in a world where either of those cards is reasonable to play, then that would be a reasonable thing to do. Like even though it does theoretically do a thing in a really unique circumstance that might solve a problem that I'm encountering a bunch, if that isn't what the format is actually allowing for, then that isn't actually something within the confines of what you can brew within, if the goal of that brew is to win. So let's look at what Edge of Eternities has done for, like, how has Edge of Eternities impacted Legacy? How do you think is the most influential way that Edge of Eternities has impacted Legacy, Zach?
Having not played much Edge of Eternities Legacy, I've maybe gotten in a few matches. I think maybe Tezzeret is the only card that I've seen really make an impact. Have you seen anything else?
Oh yeah, I think Tezzeret is one of the cards that have made an impact. But I also think another card has made an impact is the Emissary, the warp for Is It? And then every time you cast an article.
Yeah. That card's like $50 right now.
The one that I absolutely dunked on when we were doing previews as just like horrific, horrible design. Because like the goal of that design is only degeneracy and nothing else or anything interesting.
Yeah, spoiler alert, if you want to watch an episode, if you ever watch one of our spoiler episodes, just look for the card that Phil hates the most. And that's going to be the card that hits $50.
I don't even hate it the most for what it is. I hate it from a design standpoint. From a design, what else could you possibly have expected would happen? Anyway, that card. So it's that card and Tezzeret in 2 very specific ways. So Corey Steelcutter was sort of bringing back and making 8 cast sort of move into red to have another artifact threat. It's another artifact threat that doesn't get swept up, that, is impervious to removal in ways that Emissary and such are not. And the move over into red, supplied a couple of other sideboard cards, and, it was, let us pivot over into this. You also get like Pyrite Spellbomb if you want it and stuff like that. But it started showing up a little bit, but really didn't gain too much traction. Then this new card comes in. That's 1 blue red. It's an artifact. It's I forget what the first part of it is, but it's the Emissary. It makes an artifact, a 1/1 flyer every time you cast an artifact spell. And so that card, in conjunction with Corey Steelcutter, has now been enough reason for the deck to just be full on Is It, even though it's still predominantly blue. This is a blue-red artifact that is also pitchable to your force effects, that also lets you spam early, and it's also something that you can flip into off an Emissary that you can then rebuy and start churning out value in a way that Sai could not. Right now, the benefit of Sai was that it didn't die to bolt, and it had like this 2-mana thing where you could sack some artifacts and draw cards. Rarely, if ever, did that come up. When you were sacking your own board to draw cards, it was never really a relevant thing. You were already too far behind to recoup. But Emissary changes the whole game, because now, as part of the turn where you spam, now you have 2 turn 1 plays between Emissary off of your baubles, or you can just go warp this thing, lay out your baubles, go down no cards, and now have a board, right? And that board is a bunch of artifacts, which means that your Urza Saga gets bigger. Like, you have way more bigger artifacts for your Urza Saga when it comes down after the fact, and you're playing Swift Boots, so you're going to be able to churn and just be a lot more aggressive. That including Corey Steelcutter, also a very aggressive card. So then if you look at Tezzeret, Tezzeret's shown up in the Mystic Forge decks, and I don't know if you've endeavored to experience the sequence of turn 1 Ancient Tomb, Grim Monolith, Lotus Petal, or I guess if you're playing around days, you go Ancient Tomb, Lotus Petal, Grim Monolith, cast Tezzeret off the Grim Monolith, untap the Grim Monolith, cast a 4-drop. Now, even in that spot, if they had a daze,
you still have a Planeswalker.
You have a Tezzeret on the table with all of the mana you could ever want, right?
Yeah,
You're
exactly.
untapping with 5 mana. You have gone down no cards except for the Lotus Petal that traded the Lotus Petal and whatever was countered by the days. But the Tezzeret just gets to put another card in your hand when you untap, so you get to go off.
Yeah, sweet days. I'm going to draw another card anyhow. Yeah.
You have another Planeswalker on the table that's going to be really difficult to deal with if you've now set yourself back. That's also assuming that you're on the draw. But you've also set yourself back the land drop. That one land is not going to be able to convert getting this Tezzeret off the table if you're main board. So Tezzeret can allow for some really busted stuff. And so even though Mystic Forge is not going to be as broken as it was with Vexing Bauble was an abomination. Tezzeret is not an abomination. It's just a cool card and it's doing like heavy things in this archetype and booning it to where I expect it to be a pretty popular deck going into EW, because anybody who had that deck built, like, you don't just casually have Grim Monoliths lying around.
Yeah,
if you have Grim Monoliths, you've meant it, right?
You are a Grim Monolith gamer at that point. Yeah.
You're the people who have a Tabernacle. Like, if you have a Tabernacle as a lands gamer, the odds are that you want to play lands because you have a Tabernacle and you went really hard into getting that Tabernacle, and now you really want to, experience playing the card that you bought. Same thing with Grim Monoliths. Like, if you're spending a K on Grim Monoliths, you're like, okay, like, this is you've made your bed, so to speak. If you're putting a Candelabra, like if you're buying a Candelabra, you've made your bed, so to speak. Those cards
don't play
have
Delver once you buy Candelabra.
Exactly, right? So, like, I expect that the players who have the Grim Monolith and the Candelabra to, like, be like, okay, I'll just buy the Tezzerets, and now I have this, ostensibly tier 1 deck again. And so between the Emissary and the Tezzeret, leveraging these new artifact builds back into the world, you have to now look at, okay, there's now a lot of one-ring decks and a lot of fast artifact decks. Well, all that is to say, it's a lot of Urza Saga decks. But they're Urza Saga decks in different ways. The Emissary deck is one that's looking to make 20 power and hit you with a Lava Spur Boots as fast as possible, right? They're trying to check your life total. The Mystic Forge decks are trying to just overwhelm you with literally any 4-drop. But both of them are Urza Saga decks, and both of them can make huge constructs. But then what you need to do after you deal with the constructs is very different, right? Oh, do I need to do something to, like, continue removing the board? Or do I have to now do something to, like, check One Ring and Karn? These swath of threats demand very different things. The difference, though, is that they both are foundationed by Urza Saga to some degree to, like, get the engines going. And so, okay, if you're looking at Urza Saga as a pillar, what is it that I can do within this, if I'm brewing, what do I need to do? Well, I need to make sure that I can beat Urza Saga to some capacity. You've always needed to do that. But now you need to do that in a way that it can check both of the main Urza Saga decks. Now, of course, there's still lands, and lands is an Urza Saga deck that just, is recursive and grindy and whatnot. But like the walls there are going to be a little bit wider because the walls there are, that type of deck is going to be slower with its Urza Saga. It's going to be grindier. You're going to have more interaction points where your sideboard cards are going to have more space to actually convert whatever their value is. Whereas if you're doing it against Urza Saga Emissary, they're looking to chunk you real fast. You're not going to have a lot of time. And then same thing, if a One Ring or a Karn touches the table, then whatever you were trying to do is going to sort of be obsoleted before you get a chance to do anything. So the speed with which the Urza Saga decks, which I would consider lands, now 8 casts with Quarry Steelcutter and Emissary and Mystic Forge, okay, if you're brewing, you have to be able to deal with the pillar that is Urza Saga, and now whatever the walls are, it has to deal with all of those.
Yeah,
decks.
all the other stuff. The walls are determined by the other things that those decks can do.
So yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So if you're saying, okay, if we're looking at one of the pillars, which is Urza Saga, and we need to have a plan to beat Urza Saga as part of our brew, or like have a way to either go over the top of it, contend with it at an equal power axis, or disrupt it in some capacity, the walls of that context now are, I need a way to beat it out of lands, I need a way to beat it out of Acast, I need a way to beat it out of Mystic Forge. Now, what are the cards that can do those things? Or what combination of cards can do those things in the time frame that it would be necessary? And the time frame that it would be necessary, I still think, are, if you can't do it by turn 2, it's too slow. Because a Karn Forge deck is just going to slam a 4-drop on turn 2 if they're on the play. So you're going to have a way to deal with that. And then the Emissary decks are all going to also be going wide on turn 2. And then the lands decks are ones that can do it recursively. So your one shot will not be enough. Like if you have a one shot answer, it's not going to be enough. So so what do we do? So what are the options that are available to us to deal with the Urza Saga shells by turn 2 in a meaningful way? And in a way that can also be more than a one-shot or redundant enough that I can deal with, or what is the supplementary piece that I can deal with it out of lands?
Great question.
The great question. Yeah. I don't have the answers for it because we're still in the process.
So yeah, it's very new. We're still trying to determine what this format looks like, right?
But like when I was dealing with, if you were brewing to try and deal with Urza Saga before, you could argue it's like, okay, well, you could, dress down is a reasonable way to stop that stuff. But dress down doesn't really stop the Emissary, like the Emissary lines, where they can still like pump out huge artifacts. And like Quarry Steelcutter also. Quarry Steelcutter is also interesting because they can now pump a construct at instant speed if they have a second spell.
Yeah.
Which is not nothing.
Now they've got combat tricks. Yeah.
It's narrow, but it's a possibility. If there's a Quarry Steelcutter on the table, your dress down or whatever that you're playing to try and deal with the construct is not necessarily guaranteed to do the thing anymore. Because they have ways to make sure that the construct doesn't have a 0/0 body at the base of it. Again, that means is dress down no longer a quantifiable piece to look at for the brew, given the context of the format as it stands. If you were looking at it from like, okay, dress down against the Mystic Forge decks, it's like, well, you might be able to clean up the construct, but now it just got the candelabra that's now making them a ton of mana, and that dress down that you spent 2 mana versus their thing that like ended up costing them 2 lands or 2 mana like over the course of their turns, making the constructs and then getting the glasses.
Just pointing out that I got new glasses so that people are distracted for a second. Finding the right high-end cards for legacy, vintage, pre-modern, or old-school Magic can be challenging. That's where friends 3-for-1 Trading come in.
3-for-1 Trading is one of Europe's top Magic the Gathering retailers with an incredible selection of premium singles, sealed product, and even full sets, all available with free, fast, and secure worldwide shipping.
They add fresh inventory every Wednesday with weekly deals and discounts. So whether you're hunting for that elusive piece of power, a legacy staple, or something spicy for your collection, they've got you covered.
First high-end orders over $500 or €500, use the code EDFREE to get free worldwide shipping.
Check them out now at the number 3, the number 4, the number 1.gg/ED. That link takes you right to the shop and helps support the channel.
Huge thanks to 3-for-1 Trading for supporting the legacy community. Now back to the show.
A guy who plays at a local named David. He's a great guy, and he's been teching out Urza's glasses in his Urza Saga deck. And we were talking about how it's like, he just wanted to feel something. So he was like, I'm playing with Urza's glasses, and it lets me know what I have to play around and how to sequence my stuff against their opposing hand. And because of, you just get it off of Urza Saga, I thought maybe I would try it out. And I was like, have you, when he put it in play against me, I was like, I'm expecting like weird stuff. I'm like, are you about to Cabal therapy me? Because between Urza Saga making constructs as a body fighter, but then also Tezzeret turning an artifact into a creature and then sacking that creature, also delivers bodies. So Tezzeret and Urza Saga can generate enough bodies that maybe Cabal Therapy would be an interesting way to like source up your combo matchup if you're playing an Urza's Glasses in your deck. And I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting.
I just like the idea of animating an Urza's Glasses and beating somebody down with it.
I think that's really the cool flavor
You're
part.
like,
Tezzeret being like, look at me, I'm made of Darksteel, I'm way more powerful than Urza now. He could never destroy me because I'm what I'm made of, and just picks up his glasses and puts them on and goes like,
it brings a new spin on that old turn of phrase. You wouldn't hit a guy with glasses, would you?
The guy with glasses will certainly hit you, is what I've learned.
Well, no, but would you hit a guy with glasses?
Would I?
Like if you animate the glasses, you're hitting them with glasses, right?
I'm not. I see. Yeah. There you go. Right? Hitting a guy with glasses. That's it. Let's wrap it up right there. What else is there to talk about?
Yeah, the show's over. Thank you.
Thanks for watching.
It's been great talking to you.
So, do we keep going? I think we ended there, right?
We have to keep going.
All right, man. I'll see you later. Cheers, brother.
Yeah, but yeah, so going back to the walls argument beyond like talking about Urza Saga and stuff. I think it's interesting that if we take the idea of like the pillars, right? Like the pillars are the laws and the laws of the format that we've been discussing as well. The walls are not cards, right? The walls are really concepts of the format, right? The wall, because like the pillars are cards. The pillars of the format are cards in the format, right? You got Brainstorm as a pillar of the format. ForceofPhil, a pillar of the format.
Brainstorm's not a pillar. ForceofPhil is not a pillar. They're not pillars. You are not doing anything where you go into a format going, I need to respect Brainstorm. Brainstorm is good, but it's not changing how you're building your deck.
Well, is it not?
Who is doing anything? They're going, you know what? I'm going to play this specifically and only for Brainstorm.
No. I don't think that's the case. So I think fundamentally we have a different opinion of what pillars of the format are. Pillars for me are cards that cannot be replaced. Like cannot be removed from the format either. Like Brainstorm is a card you cannot replace with some other card in the format, but also
the Epic Storm just did it.
The Epic Storm, well,
the Epic Storm cut Brainstorm to play Entomb.
Okay, well, fair. Well, great. It was replaced with what I would consider another pillar of the format, right? Like Entomb is a pillar, right? I think at least now in a world where they refuse to ban Entomb we can consider to be a pillar until they say otherwise, right? So for me, the pillars are cards that cannot be replaced or can only be replaced with other pillars, as I amend my definition on the fly there. So whereas I think the laws of the format are like kind of, I think you can do a better example of what the laws are because it's something you sort of came up with. Whereas the walls of the format are literal concepts that, you can't play more than two, you can't play more than 2 mana spells because Daze exists, right? Like Daze is not necessarily like the law of the format, but it does create a wall in the format where like it's very hard to build around.
Yeah, we use a lot of terms to differentiate, like helping us articulate things. I don't want to get too lost in the semantics. Like the pillars of a format are pillars of a format. The idea of like walls in the confines of what are allowed are within a given metagame. So think of it as walls of a metagame, pillars of a format. Like pillars of a format are the broad strokes, but then the walls within the metagame that you're playing in, because a metagame can be different. And I would consider Up the Beanstalk to be a pillar of the format, right? But the current metagame is such that it is showing up in low enough numbers that the walls against, for what you would need to deal with that pillar are probably a lot wider. Just because it's not showing up. And that's a metagame thing, because the people who are playing Up the Beanstalk are not finding enough ways to combat the other pillars that are more powerful and faster in the current context.
Okay.
So if you're thinking how do I, from a brewer standpoint of how do we brew, you could go, okay, the percentage points that I really need to make up against, the current metagame that we're in, I can give up points against Beanstalk because the likelihood that I run into it is going to be a lot less than what it might have been in a previous format. And also, it's the type of deck where people can move off of it and then move back onto it because it's a base blue shell that has stuff. And if you're playing base blue players have a lot of other options that they can move into.
Yeah.
They can play Delver.
They can play,
They can play Dimir Tempo. They can play Reanimator. If they have access to, if you're playing Sultai Beanstalk or whatever, all right, you have most of the cards already available for those cards, so it's not too hard to just move in and pick up those things. Whereas, if you are, we were talking about, the Tabernacle, or the Grim Monolith, or the Candle Player, you're not really going to have a lot of space to move.
That's who you are now.
So, you are more likely to just pick up Tezzerets and then continue playing the deck, in which case that is still going to be whatever the meta share it was. And if anybody, the only thing that will likely happen for that deck is it will, at least in paper, is it will then likely slightly uptick for anybody else that buys in. But it's very unlikely that somebody's going to sell out unless they did after the previous format. But there wasn't really a reason to, because Vexing Bauble leaving didn't make the deck unplayable. It just made it not tier 0.
Yeah. Since you're enjoying the show, please like and subscribe to the video. It helps the channel grow.
Support Eternal Dodos on Patreon so we can create even more content and cover events.
Patreon supporters get an ad-free RSS feed. You can even join our deck donation tier to get your very own episode.
Join the Durdle Maniacs at patreon.com/eternaldurdles. Now back to the show.
You know, I'm just trying to think, like, if there's an easier way. Also, so when I'm going over this in my head, I'm thinking about how, like, the walls, and this goes with your metagame analysis, the walls affect the sideboard a lot more than I think the main deck as well.
You want to know an example of like what we've talked about, where I think like the value of a very particular card goes up against against the Urza Saga decks? You need a way to deal with the constructs for sure, right? So if you're playing your removal or whatever, your removal has to be instant speed. You cannot rely on sorcery speed, because end step make a construct, untap make a construct, search for Lava Spur Boots, hit you for your entire life total.
Yeah.
You don't have a window to convert sorcery speed anymore. So your removal has to be instant speed. You have to have a way to deal with the constructs. Okay, fine. Dealing with creatures. You have to deal with creatures at instant speed. Who knew? But then, other than that, I think that Null Rod. I'm currently. I've been playing 2 Null Rod. I'm interested in going up to 3 Null Rod. Null Rod against the ACAST deck, shutting off their mana base and all of their mana sources. Right? Like, okay, now that Emissary and Urza Saga both want to go wide, you need to be able to deal with creatures or artifacts in general. Null Rod shuts off the rest of their engines. You can't, like, if Emery's rebuying, like, yes, you have to still deal with Quarry Steel Cutter, but it's going to be at a much slower clip because they're not going to have as much mana to just dome off, right? Same thing that, like, it stops One Ring and it stops Candelabra out of and it stops Grim Monolith. It stops all those cards. And then against lands, maybe you don't bring in all of them, but it also does shut down Mox Diamond. So the combination of hitting all 3 decks in ways that are meaningful are important. Then what you do on top of that, and I say that some people I've played Clarion Conqueror. And Clarion Conqueror is another way that you can turn off Tezzeret and Karn.
Sick card.
Yeah. My issue with that is Dismember is a card that exists and is played typically in those decks anyway, because they want to have a way to deal with Collector Oof. So Dismember is not something that they already weren't interested in playing to begin with. And then they also have the bigger, like, Cloud Post decks, as an extension of the Forge decks. I think Forge is more powerful than Cloud Post, but Cloud Post, as you know, is also a thing to be doing as a one-ring deck. They also have the new Ugin, and Ugin can exile on casts. So even if you counter it, they can they can exile your Clarion Conqueror, but they cannot exile the Null Rod. And additionally, Null Rod costs 2, where Clarion Conqueror costs 3. So once you have that first layer, which I think is like the most broad stroke against all of the Urza Saga decks, then you can be like, okay, what is the other stuff that I want that can then cross over? Okay, well, you need some amount of graveyard hate because you're looking at Entomb Reanimate, right? Like, the graveyard decks are still in force, and you need to have a way to beat them. Whatever that sideboard graveyard hate is should also be something that can cover the lands matchup. That way they can't start loaming you and getting through on the constructs after you've, dealt with them in the first place. But like that's like an example of, like, okay, here's a card, given the confines of the format, or the walls of the format, why you would choose this over something else. And then as your starting point to answer these decks, if you're in a brewer space. Now, what does that mean if you're a brewer? Well, if we were to assume the position that if you aren't one of those artifact decks or doing something powerful with artifacts as part of your brew, that you want to play Null Rod, then you also have to think, okay, well, then I need to be able to play whatever my brew is, can't get shut off by Null Rod.
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah. If that's what you're worried about, you definitely can't just bring in cards that shut your deck off, right?
I mean, we're doing all this brewing. I mean, you want, like, the only person who recently has brewed a deck out of thin air and done well with it is Strifo. So you phone a friend.
We should phone a friend. Actually, we should bring in Strifo to talk a little bit more about brewing. I like to couch the format in this way because so much is stagnant right now. Just because we know where the format is. I mean, I will say this. I was looking at the last 30 days versus the last 7 days on Goldfish. If we look at the last 30 days, I'm gonna bring that up real fast again. So last month, right? Just to name the top 10 decks real fast. Dimir Reanimator, Red Stompy, Is It, Delver, Mystic Forge, Dimir Tempo, Oops, Sneak and Show, Doomsday, Self-Love Breakfast Lands. Now, if I go, that's 30 days, right? 7 days. Mystic Forge sneaks up into the second most played at 7.5%. We're looking at what 18.3 for Dimir Reanimator and 19. So like it gained basically that point that Dimir Reanimator had. It gained that point and went over the top of Red Stompy. But then it's just Red Stompy, Dimir Tempo, Oops All Spells, Doomsday. 8 cast sneaks in at 10, looking
People
at the bottom at 2.5. So there's an experiment to be had, which is kind of great. And I talked to David Mark the other day, and we were talking about the new 8 cast builds and stuff like that you can mess around with. So I am excited to kind of mess around with some other brews, and people are doing deck donations for us and giving us some more ideas on ways to mess with the format on top of that too, which keeps the format fresh for us.
I think that if like an example of, if you think about, rather than when figuring out the tools beyond what your legacy power level thing to do is, if you're respecting the pillars and then thinking about, okay, what do I want? What are the best, the optimal cards to do in certain positions given the walls of the format? What are the walls? I was having a conversation with Marcus the other day, and I was like, look, man, I'm really high on Flusterstorm. And I talked about that last episode. And I was high on it for a couple of reasons. The first is that all of those big mana, Urza Saga, whatever decks, they have a critical target, and that's Kozilek's Command. And typically those decks are tapping out for that Kozilek's Command in some capacity, and in which case, like Flusterstorm catching a very critical thing that they do in your end step to then try and unload a bigger thing is really valuable.
It's also feels like a 2-for-1 because they're probably going to draw a card off of it on top of that, right?
I mean, you're trading 1-for-1 in that spot, but you typically, like, if they Kozilek's Command you for anything reasonable, you're dead, right? The untap is just it's so overwhelming. They tutored their deck. It was a free spell. So like if they want to like go Kozilek's Command into Kozilek's Command, they can just do that because they make the spawns that make the Kozilek's Command free. And so like there is a critical juncture against the deck or a critical spell against the deck where Flusterstorm historically has been terrible. And now it's a spell that you definitely need to stop. The other side of it is against the Entomb Reanimate players. Well, none of the Entomb Reanimate decks, because they're Daze Wasteland, none of them are Lotus Pedaling. They're not combo decks, right? Like they're hybrid decks. And because they can't go Entomb Reanimate on turn 1, they're not Dark Ritualing Entomb Reanimating you. You will typically always have a mana, right? You at least get a turn to play a land. And then when they go, okay, end step Entomb, untap Reanimate, I like Flusterstorm because Flusterstorm beats that hand. Like if they play a second land, Flusterstorm beats that Reanimate. Yeah. So they can pay for one spell and then
through a Force of Will,
So what it does is it compels the first layer of action, right? If in that sequence, if they play land and then cast Reanimate and I fluster, they go, okay, I'll pay for one copy, daze the second copy, and then whatever other backup you might have then contends with what they have. Now, if they have Entomb Reanimate, land, force blue card daze, like, okay, if they open the nut, they open the nut.
Yeah. That's fine. Like, that's going to happen. Like, what are you going to do?
We opened our 7, and it just lined up in a way where there wasn't going to be any agency if you don't have then your own double counter backup. Or you don't have additional counter backup on top of what you had because you didn't have to,
plenty of decks
any
have
other
that,
resources.
like, perfect hand, and it happens. Yeah.
And that's on the draw.
Yeah.
The other, so, like, against that hand, like, I like that Flusterstorm wins that first war, right? Like, and the conversation is like, okay, well, what about Spell Pierce? Spell Pierce is like, Marcus was like, I think that Spell Pierce is the more main deckable card, and I agree with that. Historically, like, Spell Pierce is the thing that can catch the One Ring, it can catch the Karn, it can catch the Tezzeret that's now out there, it can catch the Grim Monolith. It has a lot more critical junctures for, like, what it can catch. But in the critical spots against the decks that I anticipate running into the most, there's a certain sequence where, like, if you try and pierce the Reanimate, they can just counter it.
Daze. Yep. And then they win.
Or Daze just counters it straight up in that sequence. Like, it can't beat the Daze. And that's a problem, I think, if it's going to be such a wide percentage of the format. Then the third thing that I like Flusterstorm against specifically is also in the Dimir Reanimator decks, but in Dimir Tempo as well. Against Tamiyo, we've talked on the pod before where it's like Tamiyo. I think Bowmaster Tamiyo is a pillar. I think, like, just putting Bowmaster and Tamiyo in your deck makes you a tier 1 strategy. And that means that in order to beat a Tamiyo, you have to be able to beat Tamiyo with them holding up blue. If they're holding up blue, you can't point a removal spell at Tamiyo. Okay, because if they brainstorm and blank your removal spell, that game is over.
Yeah, you just wasted it.
Straight over. So you have to. So the war becomes first about Tamiyo, but then really becomes about that brainstorm, because they control the narrative as long as nobody has to move. They may not even have the brainstorm, but just bluffing it is enough, right? Because then if you throw your removal spell into that, now you have to go hope they don't have it. And if you're in a position where you go, hope they don't have it, you have lost all agency.
Yeah, you're not.
Right.
There's a chance they don't have it. If they don't,
There's a chance they don't have it, but you're at the mercy of your opponent.
Yeah.
And that's not a place that you want to be. You don't want to be at the mercy of your opponent. Like, of course, there will be spots like that, but that is a very common, very early space to get into, that if you are at the mercy of the game ending, like, you can't accept that. So I like Flusterstorm in that spot, because if they go, later in the game, if against Dimir Tempo or whatever, if you're playing a deck that's like playing removal spells, you're assuming that the game's going to go a little bit longer. And if you try and remove a Tamiyo, like if you're on turn 4 and they go Tamiyo and they're holding up mana and just don't have to move, how are you supposed to do that? They can just pay for a Pierce. But if they go Tamiyo, you go removal spell, they go Brainstorm, you go Fluster, you win that.
Yeah. Well,
and
continue,
that's,
please.
So there are like very specific patterns within the current meta that I think Flusterstorm is just like also on a trajectory to go upwards. I like that it can, against Doomsday, like Fluster requires like at least 2 points of interaction from them on the back end. They can't just go Doomsday with ForceofPhil backup. You will beat that, especially if they went Dark Ritual Doomsday, because then your Storm is a lot higher. So this is to say that, like, was Flusterstorm playable in the previous format? Probably not. Not really. Is it playable in the current format? I think so, given where it is, where it's settling. Is it great? No, of course. There's still some things it doesn't hit. It doesn't hit One Ring. It doesn't hit Emissary. It doesn't, like, there are still some problems with it.
And that's kind of the compelling point of the walls, right? Like, is that you have to look at more than, there are more than one wall, right? It's like in any structure, there is more than one wall, right?
I would also ask, Zach, can you look at the metagame and can you tell our loving viewership how much of the format is Thoughtseize?
In the last 7 days, we have 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 out of the last 10 decks are Thoughtseize.
4 of the top 10.
Yeah, let's give that a percentage. Yeah, let's give that a percentage here. So we've got let's say 18 and 5 and 6. Okay, so we've got 10, 8, about 32%.
Quick maths.
About 32%. Yeah, about 32%.
All right. If you go into, let's say you're going into Eternal Weekend, right? How many rounds is that going to be? 12? 11?
Yeah. Expect to get Thoughtseized 1/3 of the time.
Okay, so yeah. So 4 of those rounds, but also, now let's calibrate. That's just 1/3 of the top decks, right? Okay. So that's 1/3 of the top decks, which means that if you're winning your games, the likelihood that you're going to continue running into those compound.
Right? Yeah.
Okay. So you're going to get Thoughtseized a lot. A lot. Which means that if you're trying to brew, your brew cannot be component pieces that get broken up by a Thoughtseize.
You need to be Leyline of Sanctity down.
Full stop.
Yeah,
you
agreed.
Can, like, if your brew folds or gets crippled pretty significantly from a Thoughtseize, full stop, not a viable strategy.
You need to be thinking about if that's what you want to be doing.
Especially in a world where the best combo deck, the best tempo deck, or the best, like, if you aren't Ancient Tombing, then the best thing to do is Force Daze, Tamiyo, Bowmaster, Thoughtseize. Like, you are not doing anything with a combination of cards, right? Unless you're doing what the group at the Epic Storm is doing, which is, okay, we'll just try and kill you a lot faster.
Yeah, just doing it all the way.
We will come closer to Belcher than we will to anything else that we've done historically by removing literally the cantrips so we can just try and storm out. So, like, I think that if Thoughtseize is a space right now where you are going, like, if you remember the time when we were getting griefed every single round, whatever your brewing was that couldn't get double griefed on turn 1, I think it's similar to you can't play a brew if you get Thoughtseize on turn 1. What does that mean, Zach? That means that your brew has to be individual power level more than anything else.
Yeah, you need to be playing full-on very good Magic cards, like the best Magic cards at their rate, right?
Which sucks.
It's a bummer.
If the best interactive decks are Thoughtseize decks, that means that the format cannot really explore interesting combinations, because a Thoughtseize breaking up an interesting combination, full stop, means you can't play your deck.
Ban Thoughtseize, you're here first.
Not saying ban Thoughtseize. I'm saying that the confines, the current metagame where Thoughtseizes is so prevalent,
yeah,
means that you can't, like, play your A plus
Brewing,
B value engine, right? Like, your A plus B has to be, show and tell plus kill you.
Yeah, your
Like,
A plus
it
B has
cannot-
to back up, which is what most good decks are doing, right? Like look at Cephalid Breakfast. It's an A plus B combo deck that also has a C and a D plan. You know, it's an A plus B A plan deck that has a B plan and has a C plan. In that, like the other half of the deck is like, oh, I'll play Nadu instead of Cephalid Illusionist. Oh, I'll play Urza Saga instead of Nadu and Cephalid Illusionist, right? And that's why that deck does so well, is because it does have 2 backup plans, right?
Yeah, when I was talking about the Urza Saga decks, I didn't even mention Breakfast. Like, that's another, like, Urza Saga is dominant.
Yep.
No, it's not dominant. It's just like it's
a very good Magic card.
Between Emissary and Tezzeret, 2 additional Urza Saga decks have come back into the fold in meaningful ways.
All right. Well, Phil.
Yeah, that's
with
cool.
that said, we will be at Steel City Extravaganza, the Steel City Spectacular this coming weekend. So if you're there, we're gonna run a live show on Sunday morning. Be there for that.
Bring your coffee.
Bring coffee.
We're
please.
talking a million miles a minute.
Yeah.
Coffee. Let's go.
Let's go. Thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll catch you on the flip. Hey, if you enjoyed this episode, hit the subscribe button.
You can also support us on patreon.com/eternaldurdles, which now offers the new deck donation tier. I'll play literally whatever you want.
So brew your spiciest or stock us up with a stock list.
I'll literally play whatever you want.
Thanks for watching.